Over the past year or so, these have increasingly faced criticism. Banning single-use plastic straws has been proposed all over the United States, with many businesses preempting potential legislation by implementing self-bans of the straws. But while these proposals have been fairly controversial, the real reasons behind them have seemingly been lost in the debate. Critics of plastic straw bans come from both the right and the left, raising concerns over personal liberty and also of scale. But what isn't as frequently being discussed is the actual impact of single-use plastic pollution. So I had a conversation with MaryEllen Mateleska, Director of Education and Conservation at Mystic Aquarium. The global sea turtle population, MaryEllen said, is particularly vulnerable, including sea turtles in and around Long Island Sound.
So kind of the straw trend all started with the picture of a turtle, right, with a straw in their nose. And they're one of many species of animals that are impacted by plastics, in particular straws that you might see, or plastic bags and so on. But really, it's almost every animal in that ecosystem. So when you think of animals like turtles, you have the largest turtle in the world, the leatherback sea turtle. It eats nothing but jellies. And you have animals like green sea turtles, which was one of the photos that went all over the place and went viral. And those animals are carnivores when they're younger, and then they turn herbivores when they're older. So you have these animals who are mistaking plastic, whether it be small plastic bits like straws, or bits of candy wrappers, or things like plastic bags. They can mistake them and they'll eat them. And those are some of your kind of more grandiose or larger animals. But we see the same thing with seals, we see the same thing with whales and with dolphins. But then as you work your way down the food chain, plastics are going to break down into smaller and smaller bits. So the smallest plankton start eating those plastics as well, and then they can bioaccumulate right on up the food chain. So really it's the ingestion of plastics and of trash is pervasive in almost every animal. In fact, most seabirds have plastic in them. Even when they've done tests of humans, every person they tested with humans had plastics in them.
Look, feel free to support or oppose plastic straw bans. I didn't pursue this story to try to convince people one way or another. However, I do believe that if people are going to hold opinions about the straw bans, they should at least be aware of the valid concerns surrounding single-use plastic. And one of those concerns hits close to home, namely food.
Every animal has, and including ourselves, has a role to play, and we never know what that species will be that gets most impacted, that can collapse an entire ecosystem or an entire food chain. So that's one of the reasons why we should care. The other reasons why, if we want to turn it a little bit more selfishly, right, is just what plastics are made out of themselves. And plastic is a term that we use, and that represents hundreds of different products, and what they're all really good at doing is just accumulating toxins. And so when you think about tuna and you look at the side of those containers, and there's containers that say don't eat tuna more than this many times a week, and that's because of the heavy metals that are bioaccumulating in there. That's what plastic can do inside of animals all the way up the food chain. But the scary part is we don't know what they're bioaccumulating. We know that animals are eating and passing plastics, but we don't know about all those toxins that have been sitting on that plastic, where they're going. And where we are at the top of the food chain, that's something we definitely need to worry about.
In other words, single-use plastic pollution ends up in the water. The plastic breaks down, sea creatures eat these microplastic particles, other sea life eat these creatures, and so when humans go fishing, they are not just catching and eating fish, but microplastic particles as well. But MaryEllen said that it isn't just people who live by the ocean who need to be concerned where their waste goes.
So we are all connected to the ocean. So the Connecticut River, so let's talk more local with our Long Island Sound. So Long Island Sound is the body of water. That Long Island is on one side, all of Connecticut and part of New York is on the other side. So that right there holds a couple of trillion gallons of water. 8 trillion, not much when you can compare it to the rest of the ocean. You have about 2.3 million people who, when they throw trash on the ground, directly go into that Long Island Sound, so they're part of the watershed. And then, there's actually about 4 million people. If we're gonna go a little bit further up and we think about all the fresh water that's dumping in there, the 70% of the fresh water that goes into Long Island Sound comes from the Connecticut River. It's 410 miles long, starts in Canada, goes through Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut until it hits the water, which means somebody in Canada who does anything along the Connecticut River in its watershed directly impacts the health of Long Island Sound. So everything is connected. Whether you live here in the Connecticut River, you live along the Mississippi, no matter where you live, you have a direct impact on the ocean environment.
On my way back from the interview, I went to the drive-thru at Dunkin' for a coffee and was greeted with this: a plastic cup and a paper straw. Now, it's very easy to look at this with some cynicism. They may have gotten rid of the plastic straw, but there's still the single-use plastic cup. However, I think there's a more optimistic take as well. While there's still work to be done, at least we're starting somewhere. MaryEllen told me that she wouldn't be doing the work she's doing if she weren't optimistic for the future of single-use plastic policy.
Ultimate goal is to not eliminate all plastics. We need plastics in our lives. There are plastics that are used for healthcare, plastics used for building. It's the single-use plastics. Plastics were designed to be around for a long period of time, but we use them for just a moment. And those are the plastics that people really need to focus on. And some people will be like, well, why does it matter? I need my plastic bag. What am I going to do without my plastic bag for my kitty litter? That's what I get a lot. 50 years ago, we didn't have plastic bags the way that we do now. So if we actually look back, we can find solutions to our current problems. And so banning a straw, banning a plastic bag is just a first step to really have us realize how much waste we all produce. You can't change people's minds, but what you can do is you can have an honest conversation. And misinformation is kind of the biggest thing to tackle, and that's with everything that you see and read, is making sure you know where the source of that information came. But when it comes to something like a straw ban or a plastic bag ban, really the first idea is to kind of build confidence. How can we get people to start changing behavior now so we can elevate it to the point where it needs to be? Ultimately, what we need to do is we need to start at the bottom and from the top down. So you have to not only get people to change their behavior and demand new types of products, but at the same time you have to have corporations who are willing to branch out and also think more sustainably.